The Blackbird true story follows one man's attempt to uncover evil, yet the show doesn't cover all the details of the amazing story. The 6-episode miniseries follows the story of Jimmy Keene and the serial killer Larry Hall in a faithful adaptation of Keene and journalist Hillel Levin's memoir In With the Devil, a fallen hero, a serial killer, and a dangerous bargain for redemption. The show's twists and turns may seem unbelievable, but the real-life events that inspired Blackbird happened more than 20 years ago and involved a serial killer who is still alive today. Taron Egerton stars in Blackbird as James Keene, a high school football player sentenced to 10 years in prison for illegal gun possession and drug dealing. He's joined in Blackbird by the mysterious and unsettling alleged serial killer Larry Hall, Paul Walter Hauser. All the Blackbird characters are real, including Jake McLaughlin's Gary Hall, Larry's twin brother, Greg Kinnear's relentless FBI agent Brian Miller, and Ray Liotta's final on-screen appearance as Keene's father, James Big Jim Keene. However, the true story may be even stranger than the miniseries. The true story of Blackbird. The real Larry Hall was a serial liar. A montage image of Larry Hall from Blackbird. Blackbird's true story is stranger than fiction. In 1995, Larry Hall was sent to USMCFP Springfield for kidnapping Jessica Roach, a 15-year-old girl who went missing in 1993. The conviction was based on Hall's original confession to the murder, despite his later attempts to recant it. This would be somewhat of a trend for Larry Hall, who continued to frustrate the FBI with fake stories and multiple confessions he went back on. The Apple TV Plus series captured some of this, including how another member of the Hall family helped bring him to justice. Larry Hall was born in Wabash, Indiana, and as Blackbird correctly showed, has a twin, Gary Hall, played by Jake McLaughlin. Larry Hall's brother Gary Hall was the normal one, and although he originally defended his brother, Gary Hall eventually helped the FBI draw confessions out of his twin sibling. Blackbird was 100% correct with its portrayal of this, despite how much it seems like a twist of fate created for a movie narrative. The similarities between Blackbird and the true story don't end there. Despite being sent to prison for the kidnap of Roach, the FBI believed Larry Hall was a serial killer who had murdered many more young women and was determined to get him to confess and keep him behind bars. To do that, the FBI really did decide to recruit a disgraced ex-football star to befriend Hall in prison. The deal offered to James Keene in Blackbird is depicted without making many alterations, as far-fetched an idea as it sounds, which is probably why the real events of Blackbird made for such a compelling miniseries. James Keene was offered a shorter sentence for befriending Larry Hall. Keene was a former football star busted on drug charges. Taron Egerton as Jimmy Keene in prison in Blackbird. In real life, Jimmy Keene was a promising young football star and the son of a police officer. He fell from grace after being caught up in a huge drug bust in the 90s called Operation Snowplow. Keene was sentenced to 10 years in prison on charges relating to drug trafficking and conspiracy, via Daily Journal and CNN. The FBI approached Keene and, in 1998, gave him a choice: serve his full sentence or try to befriend the alleged serial killer, Larry Hall, in a maximum security prison for the criminally insane. If he could successfully befriend Hall, he would be offered his freedom. James Keene chose the second option. Blackbird is an adaptation of Jimmy Keene's many months of gaining Larry Hall's trust. The real James Keene was somewhat successful on 2 counts. Firstly, Larry Hall confessed to James Keene about the murder of Jessica Roach, with Hall revealing details only the FBI and the killer would know. Secondly, Keene found Larry Hall with a map identifying several locations. Like the Blackbird character, the real-life FBI informant surmised the map led to additional bodies. Unfortunately, it came to nothing, as Keene confronted Hall and was thrown into solitary confinement. The FBI never got his message, and after his release from solitary, the map was gone. Was Larry Hall ever convicted for murder? Larry Hall was found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. Larry Hall sitting in court in a scene from Blackbird. Despite recanting his confession for the murder of Jessica Roach in both Blackbird and in real life and appealing his initial sentence, Larry Hall's story was too accurate. Larry Hall went on to be found guilty and given life without parole. However, he wasn't convicted of murder, only kidnapping. The fact that the kidnapping led to death is the only reason Larry Hall's sentence ended up being life without parole. Larry Hall is now 59 and serving his sentence in Butner, North Carolina. In the years following his interaction with James Keene, Hall confessed to several other murders, including that of Tricia Reitler. However, he has also recanted every single one of his confessions, and it remains a mystery to this day how many people Larry Hall killed. The FBI has estimated that there could be as many as 40 young women, an element of the Blackbird true story that wasn't delved into much by the show. How long was the real James Keene in prison? James Keene was released over 8 years early. Blackbird Taron Egerton James Keene. Despite Taron Egerton's Keene and the real James Keene being technically unsuccessful in drawing any further confessions out of Larry Hall, he was still given his freedom after his time in USMCFP Springfield. The real James Keene passed a polygraph test that confirmed he truly did befriend Larry Hall and tried to elicit information from him. Jimmy Keene served around 17 months of his 120-month sentence. As per Daily Journal, the James Keene arc included a tragic turn from his true story too. In the show and in real life, Keene's father was dying while Keene was in prison, and it was one of the reasons Keene took the risk of heading into a maximum security prison. After being released as a free man, Keene spent 5 years with Big Jim before he passed away. He went on to write his memoirs with the help of a journalist, and the subsequent story has now been adapted into the critically acclaimed Blackbird. What Blackbird leaves out about the true story? Mostly subplots and side characters had their stories changed. Blackbird was incredibly accurate and retold the story of Larry Hall and James Keene without many changes. However, the miniseries omitted a few details from the real events. While Blackbird explores some of Larry Hall's upbringing, such as that he and his brother regularly helped their father at his job as a grave digger, some key details about the serial killer's early years weren't included. There's good reason, though, as these details are much less certain, and covering them would require a creative license that could have detracted from the authentic feel of Blackbird.